He arrived quietly, almost unnoticed, as he usually did. People in the room were chatting, tuning their instruments, laughing softly among themselves. It was a small community music gathering. Nothing formal, nothing grand. Just a group of people who loved sound and wanted to share a little of what they knew. He moved through the room with slow steps, carrying the weight of someone who didn't like drawing attention. His shoulders were slightly bent, his hands tucked in his pockets, and his eyes kept drifting toward the piano standing in the corner. For him, music was a private world. He had never been the kind of person who wanted to stand on a stage or be in the center of a crowd. He liked silence, calm corners, and the quiet comfort of a piano where no one expected anything from him. But today was different. Today he was here, in a room full of people who were ready to hear something. Even if it was small, even if it was simple. The teacher leading the group spotted him and gave a warm nod. The teacher always encouraged everyone to try something, even if it was just a few notes. It wasn't about perfection. It wasn't about pressure. It was about sharing. That was why the young man chose to attend in the first place. No judgments. No competitions. Just music. There were a few performances before it was his turn. A child played a short tune on a flute, earning soft claps from the audience. A teenager tried a small melody on a guitar. Another student played a cheerful piece on a violin. Nothing too serious, nothing too difficult. It was just a simple evening. When the teacher finally called him, he hesitated for a moment. Not because he was scared of performing, but because he wasn't sure whether he belonged here. The teacher smiled again, reassuring him in a gentle, almost silent way. So he walked toward the piano. The piano was old, but still beautiful. Its wood had scratches from years of use, its keys slightly uneven in color, some of them yellowed with age. But he liked that. He liked instruments that had lived a long life, instruments that felt real, carried memories of every hand that had touched them. He sat down slowly. His back straightened a little, though not completely. His feet settled near the pedals but didn't touch them yet. His hands hovered above the keys for a brief second as he breathed in. The room was not completely quiet, but the conversation softened. People knew it was his turn, though no one expected anything dramatic. The teacher gave him a basic tune to play. It was the kind of melody that beginners usually practiced in their first weeks. Light, simple, predictable. He nodded slowly, accepting the choice without any complaint. He didn't ask for something harder. He didn't try to show that he could do more. Instead, he placed his fingers lightly on the keys. The first note was soft, almost too soft, but it was clean, steady, and honest. Then the second note followed. Then the third, forming a small, gentle pattern. It was the same familiar tune everyone knew, something that didn't demand much effort. But the moment he started playing, something about his presence changed. It wasn't dramatic at first. It wasn't even something most people would catch unless they looked closely. His shoulders relaxed in a strange way, as if the piano had become a safe place the moment his fingers touched it. His breathing slowed, settling into a quiet rhythm that matched the music. Some people glanced at him casually, expecting to see another simple performance like the ones before. But when they looked at his hands, they noticed how steady and controlled they were. His fingers moved with the kind of confidence that didn't match the simplicity of the tune. It was as if he was gently guiding the melody rather than just repeating it. The teacher watched carefully. There was always something different about this young man, something that hinted at a deeper connection with the piano. The teacher had seen many students play, and many had talent, but very few carried music in their body the way he did. Even in the first few seconds, the teacher could sense it. Still, the tune remained simple. He wasn't trying to change it. Not yet. He simply played it as it was written, with small breaths between each phrase. But even within that simplicity there was emotion. Not a loud emotion, not something dramatic or heavy. It was the kind of emotion that came from someone who cared deeply about sound. Someone who felt the weight of every note. The room began shifting without anyone noticing at first. Conversations faded. People who were distracted turned their heads. Even kids who had been whispering quietly began to still their hands. It wasn't because the tune was impressive. It wasn't because the melody was difficult. It was because of the way he played it. There was care in every movement. There was softness, depth, and something that made people feel as if the tune had a story hidden inside it. His eyes remained partly lowered, almost as if he was looking into the piano instead of at the audience. He didn't want to see people watching him. He didn't want to think about being judged. For him, these moments were personal. Every note he played connected him to memories he rarely shared. The room didn't know that, but they felt something as he continued. The teacher crossed their arms slowly, a sign of growing curiosity. They had assigned the simple tune because they thought it matched the group's level. They had no idea it would reveal something more. There was a softness in the way he shaped the melody, almost like he was speaking without words. Each note carried a small piece of emotion that wasn't forced. It was natural, honest. Even when the tune repeated, he didn't rush it. He let it breathe. He let it settle. The audience began to lean in unconsciously. They didn't understand why the tune suddenly felt different. After all, it was the same sequence of notes that many others had played before. But for some reason, when he played it, it didn't sound like a beginner's melody. It sounded like something deeper, something warm and full. His fingers moved smoothly. He wasn't showing off. He wasn't trying to impress. He was simply doing what felt right. His hands knew the piano well, even if he never spoke about it. He had spent many nights alone with a keyboard or an old piano, practicing in quiet corners where no one could hear him. Not because he wanted to become famous, but because music helped him breathe. Memories flickered through him while he played. A small room with dim lights. A cold evening when he practiced until midnight. The feeling of discovering a new chord progression and playing it. For hours because it made him feel something he couldn't explain. The countless moments when he whispered to himself, promising he would improve even if no one ever saw it. Those memories lived in his fingers now. They shaped the way he touched each key, and the audience could sense something, even if they didn't know the details. As the tune reached its middle part, he let his hands relax further. The melody still followed the same pattern, but his timing had a special softness to it. He wasn't rushing to finish. He wasn't trying to get past the difficult parts. He was savoring the simple beauty of each measure. Someone in the back of the room whispered, "He plays differently." There was nothing complicated happening, but the feeling behind it made the room feel warmer. The teacher looked at him with a mix of surprise and respect. There was something rare about a person who could take a basic tune and make it feel alive. It wasn't skill alone. It was heart. The young man didn't notice any of this. He was too focused on the music. Each note guided him forward, leading him through a quiet world where nothing else mattered. Not the people, not the room, not the silence growing behind him. Only the piano and the sound it carried. When he reached the last set of notes, he slowed slightly, letting the melody fall gently into silence. He lifted his fingers off the keys with the same careful touch he used when he began. The room did not clap right away. They didn't know if they should. The pause wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was a moment of quiet understanding, as if everyone needed a second to return from wherever the music had taken them. He looked up slowly, unsure of what he would see. He expected people to turn back to their conversations, to treat his playing as nothing special. But instead, he found eyes watching him with a mix of curiosity and quiet respect. He didn't smile. He didn't boast. He simply nodded once, stood from the piano bench, and returned to his seat. He sat quietly, blending back into the room, just as easily as he had arrived. But something had shifted. The teacher watched him with a thoughtful expression, realizing that the simple tune had become something more, and though he didn't know it yet, this was only the beginning of what he would show the room. He walked back to his seat quietly, trying to make himself as small as possible, as if he could blend into the chair. Even though the room had already shifted its mood because of him, he did not want the attention. He never liked being watched for too long. His performance, simple as it was, had unsettled something in the room, but he didn't know it. He only knew that his hands were still warm from the piano keys. He placed them on his lap and stared at them for a few seconds. He had not meant to put emotion into the tune. It had just happened. It was something that always happened when he touched a piano. He could not help but feel something when the notes flowed. He had learned long ago that when he played, he became more open than he normally allowed himself to be. The people around the room exchanged small glances. Some tried to hide their curiosity. Others whispered softly, wondering how such a simple tune had turned into something that felt deeper. But he didn't see any of this. He kept his head lowered, looking at the floor, hoping no one would come up to him. The next performer was called up. Slowly, the room's attention shifted away from him. But something was still different. There was a quiet undercurrent that lingered in the air, a subtle awareness that something unexpected had taken place. A young boy went up with a guitar. He strummed lightly, his fingers uncertain as he tried to remember the notes. People listened politely, but their minds were still half stuck on the piano tune from earlier. Even the teacher kept glancing at the quiet young man like someone who had discovered a hint of a hidden story. He kept his gaze down the whole time, pretending to focus on the other performances, but in truth, he could still feel the music in his chest, the way it always lingered long after his fingers stopped. This happened every time he played. It was like the piano was the only place where he could express thoughts and emotions he never spoke out loud. When the boy finished his guitar tune and returned to his seat, the teacher stepped forward again. The teacher's eyes scanned the room, but they paused just briefly on him, almost as if they were trying to connect something. The teacher had been teaching for years, had seen countless students come and go, but the way this young man had played a simple tune, it didn't match someone who was still learning. The teacher moved on, calling the next student. A girl went up to play something gentle on a violin. Her bow trembled slightly at first, then steadied. The tune was nice, calming, but even she seemed aware that the room wasn't fully reset yet. She kept glancing toward the piano as if it held the memory of something impressive. He felt uncomfortable, sensing the slight shift even if he didn't fully understand it. He was used to walking into rooms without anyone noticing him. That was what he preferred: quiet, invisible, free from expectations. When the violin performance finished, a couple of people clapped loudly, more out of respect than enthusiasm. The girl smiled politely and returned to her seat. There was a short break in the middle of the session. People started moving around, grabbing water, stretching their legs, or chatting in small groups. The room grew warmer with all the small conversations. But a few people kept glancing toward him, curious but unsure whether to approach him. He kept his hands folded and stared at the floor, pretending to adjust his shoe to avoid eye contact. Then he heard a voice beside him. "Hey." He froze for a moment before slowly lifting his head. It was one of the older students, someone who had been learning piano for over a year and usually liked being confident in front of others. "I didn't know you played like that," the student said. Tilting their head thoughtfully, he felt a jolt of discomfort, the kind that made his chest tighten slightly. "It was just a simple tune," he murmured. "Yeah, but you played it different. It sounded, I don't know, better." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just gave a small shrug. The student tried again. "Were you taught somewhere before?" "No," he said quickly, almost too quickly. The student raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. "You sure?" He nodded once. "I practice by myself." The student was about to ask something else, but the teacher called everyone back for the second half of the gathering. The student left, but not without a curious look that made him shift in his seat. As everyone settled down, the teacher stood near the piano again. There was something thoughtful, almost calculating, in the way the teacher looked around the room. "We're going to try something different for the second half," the teacher said. "Instead of everyone playing alone, I want to pair some of you together. It helps with learning, timing, listening, and teamwork." People murmured softly, surprised but not opposed. The teacher began calling pairs: 2 violin students, a flute and piano student, a guitar and keyboard student. Then the teacher paused. The room quieted for a second. "Can you come up again?" the teacher said, looking straight at him. His breath caught. He pointed at himself as if asking, "Me?" The teacher nodded. He stood up slowly. His legs felt a little heavier than before. He didn't know why he was being called again. No one else had been asked twice. "Come stand by the piano," the teacher said. He walked forward, feeling dozens of eyes on him again. The room wasn't loud now. It wasn't buzzing with conversation like before. Instead, there was a quiet curiosity hanging in the air when he reached the piano. He stopped beside the teacher. "I want you to play the same simple tune again," the teacher said gently. He blinked, confused. "The same tune?" "Yes," the teacher said with a calm smile. "Exactly the same one." He hesitated, unsure if he should. "Why?" "Just trust me," the teacher said. The trust wasn't natural for him. But the teacher's voice had a steady warmth that made it hard to refuse, so he sat down at the piano again. This time, however, the room was completely silent before he even touched the keys. He placed his fingers on the keys again, feeling the familiar cool surface under his skin. His heart beat a little louder now. He tried to push away the thought of all those eyes on him. He tried to imagine he was alone. He took a breath. Then he played the first note, just like earlier. The tone was soft and clean. The tune began to shape itself again. Simple, small, ordinary. But his touch naturally added warmth to it. He did not know how to play without emotion. It wasn't something he could turn on or off, but this time, because the room was completely silent from the very first second, the change in atmosphere was stronger. Every little nuance in his playing felt amplified. People leaned in without meaning to. The teacher stood behind him with folded arms, watching closely. He let the tune flow like before, letting each note settle before moving to the next. Halfway through, he felt the same shift in himself that he always felt when he played. It was like the world softened around him. The room faded. The people disappeared. Only the keys remained. But this time, he sensed something else, something unexpected. It was as if his hands were searching for something new, even though the tune was supposed to stay simple. His fingers felt an urge to move differently, to add small touches here and there. Touches that weren't written in the melody. He resisted at first. He didn't want to change anything. He didn't want to stand out. But music had always had a quiet way of pushing him forward, so on the next phrase, his fingers naturally added a tiny variation. Just a slight change in timing. A slightly softer touch. A longer pause before the next note. It was nothing dramatic, but the room felt it. People exchanged glances. The teacher's eyebrows lifted, watching closely. He didn't mean to change the tune. But the melody in his heart always pressed forward. Like a river that couldn't stay still then. Without fully realizing it, he added another soft variation. A gentle curve in the melody. A deeper touch on a chord. A little bit of emotion that seeped out quietly. Someone in the room inhaled sharply. He continued, unaware that he was slowly pulling the room deeper into the music. The soft tune was beginning to stretch, to breathe, to grow. By the time he reached the final line of the melody, it was no longer the exact tune the teacher had assigned. It still had the same structure, but the expression was different. More alive, more personal, he finished with a gentle final note, letting it fade naturally when the sound disappeared. The room did not move. No one clapped. No one spoke. It was as if every person in the room had forgotten what they were supposed to do after a performance. He looked up slowly. Confused by the silence, the teacher stepped forward. Placing a hand on the piano, "You didn't just play a simple tune," the teacher said softly. "You changed it," he swallowed, unsure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. "I didn't mean to. It just happened." The teacher smiled gently. That's what makes it special. He didn't know how to react. He lowered his eyes again, feeling almost embarrassed, but the room was still quiet, watching him with a new kind of attention, a deeper one. As if they were beginning to understand that he wasn't just another student. He wasn't just another player. Something about his playing had opened a door, and though he didn't realize it, this was the moment when that simple tune began, changing into something much bigger. This was the shift no one expected. This was the moment the room felt the first spark of something extraordinary. He remained seated at the piano for a moment after the teacher spoke, unsure of what was expected of him. The room was too quiet, too focused, and it made him feel exposed in a way he wasn't used to. He slowly stood up, trying to slip back into the background, but but something in the air had changed. People had felt something in his music, even though he had no intention of showing anything special. He only wanted to play honestly. He took a few steps back toward the chairs, hoping the attention would fade, but it didn't. When he sat down, he felt eyes following him for a few seconds longer. It wasn't judgment, and it wasn't pressure. It was curiosity. But even curiosity made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being noticed at all. The teacher let the moment breathe before speaking again. "Thank you," the teacher said softly, not only to him, but to the entire room, as if acknowledging the shift that had happened. Then the teacher turned to the group. "Let's continue." But continuing wasn't as easy as before. The next pair went up to play something together, a guitar and a small keyboard. They did their best, but the room wasn't fully present. Everyone's ears were still tuned to the echo of the piano. Still holding on to the unexpected emotion that had filled the air, the pair finished. And the teacher encouraged them with a warm smile. But even they sensed that the atmosphere had changed. They walked back to their seats with half-formed smiles, unsure why the room didn't feel the same. He watched quietly from his chair, wishing he could erase whatever he had done. He didn't like standing out. He didn't like the feeling that people expected something more from him. He liked being ordinary. Ordinary meant safe. A soft voice whispered near him. "How did you do that?" He looked to his right and found a younger student, someone who had only recently joined the group. The student's eyes were wide, filled with admiration rather than pressure. "I didn't do anything," he replied softly. "But you made it sound different," the student insisted. "Like it wasn't the same song." He lowered his head slightly. "I didn't mean to change it." The student nodded slowly, as if trying to understand something beyond words. It felt like the song had feelings. He didn't respond to that. He didn't know how to. Feelings were the one thing he never talked about. He let the conversation fade naturally. The student soon turned to watch the next performers. The teacher continued pairing students, letting the room settle into a rhythm again. A flute and violin duo played a cheerful piece. A pair of singers tried harmonizing a small melody. Someone even asked to play a short drum beat with a keyboard accompaniment. Slowly, the lightness began returning to the group. But beneath that lightness, there was still a quiet buzz on unspoken awareness that something meaningful had happened earlier. After another round of performances, the teacher called for a short pause. People got up again, stretching, chatting, and walking around. The room filled with small sounds of movement. But now, more people walked past him than before. Some gave him small smiles. Some nodded. Some looked like they wanted to say something but didn't know how. He kept his eyes down and pretended to check something on his shoe again. It was becoming his small escape whenever he felt uncomfortable. A gentle tap came on his shoulder. He looked up. It was the teacher. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" The teacher asked softly. He stood up slowly, sensing something serious in the teacher's voice. They stepped to the side of the room where it was a little quieter. Though people nearby could still see them, it felt private enough for a real conversation. The teacher looked at him with calm eyes. It's the kind that were patient but searching. "You played beautifully today," the teacher began. He looked away, unsure what to say. "Did someone teach you how to play like that?" The teacher asked gently. He shook his head. "No, no formal lessons." "No." The teacher nodded slowly, processing the answer. "You have something rare," the teacher said after a moment. "You don't just play notes. You feel them, and people can hear that." He felt his chest tighten. "I didn't mean to change anything. I'm sorry if it was wrong." The teacher's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Wrong? Not at all? I asked you to play the simple tune again because I wanted to understand what I heard the first time. You made a basic melody feel alive. That's not something everyone can do." He swallowed hard, unsure how to handle words like that. Praise made him nervous. Attention made him uneasy. He didn't know how to accept it or what to do with it. The teacher continued, "I want to help you grow. I think there's more inside you than you realize." His instinct pushed back immediately. "I don't want to stand out," he said quietly. The teachers softened their voice. "You don't have to stand out. You don't have to perform in front of large crowds. You don't even have to show anyone if you don't want to. but don't hide from what makes you special. He looked down at his hands again, the same hands that had caused all this attention. He didn't feel special. He didn't feel like he had anything unique. He had only played the way he always played. The teacher placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Let the music lead you, not the fear. He didn't reply. He just nodded slowly. The break ended, and everyone returned to their seats. The teacher resumed the session. But now there was something deeper in the teacher's tone, like they were planning something silently soon. It was time for the final round of performances. People began playing once more, but this time, the teacher watched him carefully, as if waiting for the right moment. When it came time for the last performance of the evening, the teacher paused. I want to try something, the teacher said to the group. People looked up, curious. I want everyone to listen carefully. Not to the difficulty of the music, but to the emotion behind it. Music is more than notes. It is expression, feeling, and connection. The teacher turned toward him. Will you play again? This time, something you feel. Not assigned. Not guided. Just what comes naturally. His heart dropped. He shook his head slightly. I can't, he whispered. The teacher stepped closer. You can. And you don't have to impress anyone. Just play what's inside you. The room fell quiet, waiting. His hands trembled slightly. Not from fear of the piano, but from the fear of revealing too much. Music was the only place where his real self slipped through. And he wasn't used to showing that to people. I don't know what to play, he murmured. Then sit, the teacher said softly, and let your hands decide. He stood frozen for a moment. Then slowly he took one step, then another, toward the piano. The bench felt different this time, not like a place to perform, but like a place to confess something quietly. He placed his hands on the keys. They felt familiar again, like home. The room waited, breaths held, eyes softened. He closed his eyes. He took a long, slow breath. Then his fingers moved. The first notes he played weren't part of the simple tune. They weren't from any song he had practiced recently. They came from somewhere deeper, somewhere quiet and private. A soft melody formed, sure at first like a whisper learning to speak. But slowly it grew steadier, warmer. It wasn't loud. It wasn't powerful. But it carried something human, something honest. People leaned in. He played the way he did when he was alone, with no rules, no patterns, just emotion. His fingers moved as if telling a story he had never said out loud. Small moments, quiet worries, little hopes he kept hidden. The melody shifted gently, rising and falling like slow breathing. It had no fixed shape, no strict rhythm, but it felt alive. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. The piano became his world again, the room fading away, placed by the comfort of sound. As the melody grew, each note carried something more, something deeper, and the room felt it. People had never heard him play something original before, something straight from the heart. Then, without warning, the melody expanded. His fingers moved faster. Not wild, not rushed, but with purpose. The tune began weaving itself into something more complex, more colorful, more full. People's eyes widened. It wasn't loud yet, but it was building, shifting, shaping itself into something that felt like the beginning of a storm. And he didn't even know it. He was just playing, but the room could feel it. They could feel that the simple tune from earlier was only the surface. Deep inside him was something powerful, something waiting, something growing. And at that moment, the room realized that what they heard now was only the beginning of the transformation that was about to come. The hall settled into a deep stillness. Long before he even placed his hands on the keys, it was the kind of silence that felt almost too heavy, as if everyone inside kept their thoughts tucked away, waiting to see what he would do next. The lights were soft now, not as bright as earlier, almost as if the room itself understood that whatever was coming needed space to breathe. He took a slow breath. His fingers relaxed at his sides for a moment, and then he gently pulled the piano bench a little closer. His heart was not racing anymore. Earlier, during the practice room moments with his mentor, he had felt nervous, and full of questions. But now, as he sat in front of the piano again for the second round, something inside him had shifted. It wasn't confidence exactly. It wasn't pride. It was more like Claudia, a quiet sense that the music he carried inside had finally found enough strength to step out. What surprised him most was how calm the room felt when he looked up. The judges sat with patient expressions, their notebooks ready, their eyes steady. They did not seem eager to grade him or ready to criticize. They simply waited. The audience, too, was softer now. Many of them had watched countless performances that day. Most were drained, some even bored. But when he entered, something in the way he walked caught their attention. Maybe it was his earlier warm-up. Maybe it was the whispers about the boy who turned a simple tune into something powerful. Or maybe it was just the energy he carried now calm, but strangely firm. He placed both hands on the keys but didn't play yet. He closed his eyes for a moment, not to block anything out, but to bring everything in. He could almost hear the advice from his mentor echoing inside his mind. Don't hold the music too tightly. Let it breathe. Let it live through you. When he opened his eyes again, he felt ready. He pressed the first note. It was soft, delicate, almost floating. But it wasn't weak. The note carried weight not because of volume, but because of intention. It carried emotion, memory, and a steady purpose. The audience leaned forward slightly, unsure, but curious. They could sense something building. He followed the first note with another, and then another, letting the melody form slowly like a small stream beginning to find its path. It was the same tune that had been given to him earlier, that basic, plain, nearly dull assignment. But he had changed. And so the tune changed with him. Soon, the soft beginning began to grow. His fingers moved more freely now, weaving small details into the melody, letting light flourishes slip between the notes. It wasn't showy. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. Every movement felt natural, like breathing. The judges exchanged brief glances, subtle but noticeable. This wasn't the same boy who walked onto the stage that morning. Something had opened inside him. He moved into the middle section, and the energy began to rise. His hands traveled across the keyboard with more determination, pulling harmonies from the lower keys and pairing them with bright threads from the higher ones. The music thickened, became fuller, richer. The room's air shifted with it. The audience could feel it, not loud yet, not explosive yet, but undeniably growing. He remembered a moment earlier that day, when he had doubted himself so deeply that he almost wanted to walk away. He remembered standing in a quiet hallway, staring at his hands, wondering why a simple tune felt like a mountain he couldn't climb. He remembered the pressure, the fear of looking foolish, the weight of expectations he carried quietly. And now, as he played, it was as if all those emotions found a place to go in the music, not inside him. His shoulders relaxed slightly. His breathing steadied. His hands moved with a new firmness. Then the melody shifted again. This time, the room felt the change before anyone recognized it. The sound deepened, grew bolder. The audience sat up straighter. The judges held their pens above their papers, but didn't write yet. The tune was still the same at its core, but now it carried fire. He didn't rush. He didn't slam the keys or exaggerate. He simply let the music rise naturally, the way a wave rises when pushed by the wind. The hall filled with a thick, warm sound that spread in every direction. Some people in the audience didn't realize they were holding their breath until they exhaled all at once. The change was subtle, but powerful. He reached the part where the basic tune normally repeated itself in a predictable pattern. Instead of letting that repetition settle in, he breathed new life into it. He stretched the notes slightly, reshaped the rhythm, and allowed the melody to lean forward with more force. It was still recognizable, still honest to the original assignment. But now it carried layers of emotion behind it. His left hand struck a deep chord that rumbled like distant thunder. The room vibrated, not loudly, but with strength. And with that, something inside him unlocked. His playing surged. The once simple tune now towered over the hall with commanding presence. His hands flew with precision across the keys, not wild, not chaotic, but controlled and powerful. Every movement felt like it had purpose. The music roared, without becoming harsh. It demanded attention without begging for it. People in the audience stared, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. They had not expected this, especially not from someone who looked so quiet, someone who earlier seemed unsure. But now he played like someone who had something to say, something important, something that had waited inside him for a long time. The judges leaned forward, elbows on the table, their expressions tightening not in disapproval, but in concentration. They needed to hear every note. They needed to understand how he had transformed a basic tune into something bold and mature. He felt the entire room holding on to the energy he created. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid of it. He embraced it. The music didn't control him, and he didn't control the music. They worked together, pushing forward as if carving a path through the air. Then, after one final surge of sound, he softened. Not all at once, gradually, carefully, like storm clouds, pulling back to reveal the sky behind them. His hands slowed. The melody returned to its softer form, but even now, the gentleness carried strength. It was no longer the fragile softness of the beginning. It was the calm that comes after a powerful moment, a calm that speaks, not hides. He played the final 3 notes slowly, letting each one echo across the hall. And when the last note faded, he didn't move. He sat still for a moment, letting the silence return, letting the room breathe again. No one clapped yet. They were too stunned, too caught in the last echoes of what they had heard. He lifted his hands from the keys and rested them on his lap. Then he looked up. The audience stared at him with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Some had tears in their eyes without fully understanding why. Others felt a deep warmth inside, the kind that stays with a person long after the performance ends. The judges finally blinked themselves back into reality. One of them scribbled something quickly. Another simply let out a soft sigh, as if relieved to witness something so rare. He stepped away from the piano slowly, not rushing, not trying to act dramatic. He simply walked with the quiet awareness that something powerful had happened, something he didn't plan, but didn't run from either. As he reached the side of the stage, he felt his mentor's presence even though the man stood at a distance. Their eyes met briefly, and the mentor nodded once, a small nod, but full of meaning. He didn't need praise. He didn't need applause. In that moment, he only needed the simple truth he had discovered. The music inside him was real. It was stronger than he ever believed, and when he trusted it, it could move an entire room. Behind him, the hall remained silent. But it wasn't the silence of emptiness anymore. It was the silence left behind after something unforgettable. And though none of them knew it yet, this performance, the Thunderous Masterclass that rose from a basic tune, was only the beginning of what would shape the next part of his journey. He stepped out of the hall slowly, not because he was tired, but because the weight of what had just happened still followed him like a warm shadow. His chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, not rushed, not shaky. It was the kind of breathing that comes after someone has given everything inside them without holding back. Even the corridor outside the performance hall felt different now. Lighter, almost peaceful. He leaned gently against the wall, letting his hands rest at his sides. For a long moment, he didn't think about scores, judges, or results. He didn't think about whether he had done well or whether anyone liked his performance. All he felt was a quiet awareness that something important had changed inside him. The music he had played was more than a performance. It was something honest, something true. As he stood there, he heard quiet footsteps approaching. He didn't look up right away, but when he finally raised his head, he saw someone from the organizing team, a soft-spoken person whose job throughout the event had been to guide performers in and out of the stage. They had seen hundreds of nervous students walk past them, but when they looked at him now, their expression was different. They didn't say anything at first. They simply gave him a small bottle of water and said in a gentle voice, "You should sit for a moment." He smiled faintly, nodded, and walked toward a row of empty chairs. Instead of collapsing into the seat like someone relieved to be done, he lowered himself quietly. Still feeling the lingering vibration of the final notes inside his chest, the person walked away. Leaving him alone with his thoughts, He didn't replay the mistakes because, for the first time, he couldn't really think of any. He didn't replay the nerves because they had vanished the moment he allowed himself to trust the music. Instead, his mind drifted to something unexpected, a childhood memory. He saw himself as a small boy, sitting on a wooden stool in his house, tapping random keys on an old keyboard that barely worked. He remembered the uneven sound, the broken keys, the way dust puffed out every time he pressed harder than he should have. He remembered smiling at the sound, not because it was music, but because it felt like a secret language he wanted to learn. That memory felt distant but comforting. And now, sitting in the quiet corridor of a real performance hall, he realized something. The feeling he had today, the freedom, the honesty, the power was the same feeling he had chased since that first moment on the broken keyboard. He looked down at his hands. They were steady, warm, relaxed. Just then, a low murmur rose from inside the hall. It wasn't loud, but it was the kind of sound that told him something was happening. He didn't rush to stand. He simply listened. Applause echoed faintly, then faded. More murmurs followed. Chairs moved. Doors opened. The session was coming to an end. He took another slow breath. The doors swung open, and a stream of people began to walk out. Students, parents, teachers, organizers. Some looked tired, others excited. A few spoke about pieces they liked or mistakes they noticed. But after a minute or so, a strange thing happened. People began to turn their heads toward him. Some recognized him from earlier. They didn't know his name, but they knew his performance. Instead of walking past him, a few slowed down. One person stopped completely. "Was that you?" a young performer asked, their voice full of awe. He nodded, unsure how to respond. That was. The young person struggled for words. "I don't know what to call it." It didn't sound like the same tune the rest of us got. It sounded like something bigger. He didn't know how to handle praise. He simply offered a small smile and said, "I just tried to play it the way it felt inside." The young performer nodded slowly. Well, it felt big inside too, or people passed by, some offering small nods, some soft smiles. A few whispered about the thunderous middle part, or the surprising shift in the melody. None of it felt real. None of it felt like something he expected. His mentor approached last. He didn't walk fast. He didn't walk slow. He walked with the same calm confidence he always carried. But today, that confidence came with something softer in his eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, his mentor sat down beside him and said, "You heard what you needed to hear today." He looked at him. Unsure what the words meant, the mentor continued in a low, steady voice. "Not from the judges. Not from the audience. From yourself." He felt his throat tighten, not with sadness, not with fear, but with understanding. "You found your voice," the mentor said quietly. "And when a musician finds their voice, the world can't help but listen." They sat in silence for a few seconds. Then his mentor patted his shoulder. A heavy pat. Not a dramatic one, but a gentle, meaningful touch. "No matter what happens next, remember this feeling. Protect it. Don't let the noise around you ever drown it out." With that, the mentor stood and walked away, leaving him with words that would linger far longer than applause ever could. A few minutes later, the announcement finally came. Someone stepped into the hallway, called for everyone who had performed to gather near the stage again. It was time for results. The hallway buzzed with energy as performers rushed back inside. He rose from the chair slowly and followed the group. Inside the hall, the atmosphere was completely different now. The tension was back, but this time, it wasn't the quiet uncertainty from earlier in the day. Now it was a mix of curiosity, hope, nerves, and excitement. People whispered and shifted in their seats. He stood with the rest of the participants, hands folded in front of him. The judges stepped onto the stage, carrying clipboards. The chief judge spoke first. They gave a long speech about talent, bravery, creativity, and growth. He heard the words, but they didn't hold him the way the music had earlier. He simply waited patiently. Finally, the judge's tone changed. This year, the judge said, One performance surprised us more than any other. A simple tune was transformed into something truly remarkable. It carried courage, expression, and depth. It was not loud for the sake of being loud. It was not soft for the sake of being gentle. It was honest. A murmur spread through the room. The judge looked up from the paper. The top recognition for this category goes to... He felt a strange stillness wash over him, the performer who took a basic melody and turned it into a thunderous masterclass. Then they said his name. The room erupted, not wildly, but warmly. It wasn't the applause that mattered. It was the feeling behind it. Respect, admiration, appreciation. As he walked toward the stage, he didn't feel proud in a loud way. Instead, he felt deeply grateful for every moment that brought him here. Grateful for every doubt he had learned from. Grateful for every piece of music that had shaped him. The judge handed him the award, and he bowed slightly, not out of formality, but out of sincerity. When he stepped off the stage, he felt lighter than air. But the journey didn't end there. People approached him afterward, not for praise, not for attention, but for connection. Some asked how he shaped the tune. Others asked about his feelings while playing. Some simply said his music made them feel something they couldn't describe. He didn't have perfect answers. He spoke honestly. I just tried to play what felt real. As the hall slowly emptied, he stepped outside into the cool evening air. The sun had already set, but the sky held a faint glow, soft orange fading into blue. He walked toward the quiet street, carrying nothing but the small award and the memory of a performance that had changed him. The air felt fresh. The night felt calm. And inside him, the music rested peacefully, no longer hidden, no longer uncertain. It waited not with pressure, but with promise, because what began as a basic tune had become something powerful, and this was only the start of the musician he was becoming.